Dear learners, today we are going to discuss about triggers. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss database triggers in SQL using database triggers and also restrictions for database triggers. So these are the topics we are going to discuss today. First of all, we'll see what is a trigger. An SQL trigger is a mechanism that automatically executes a specified PL/SQL block when a trigger event occurs on a table. You should understand that trigger is a PLSQL block. Okay, and this PLSQL block will be automatically called whenever a particular event occurs. We'll see what do you mean by this event and when this trigger will be initiated or executed automatically. So the triggering event may be an insert operation or a delete operation or an update operation. Okay. So I said automatically trigger will be initiated on the event, triggering event, and the event may be either insert or delete, okay, or update. So while creating a trigger itself, you have to mention what is the triggering event. So based on that, the trigger will be initiated. The trigger is associated with the database table and is fired when the triggering event take place on the table. And it works like event condition action. We see what are the events. Event occurs in databases. Example, addition of a new row or a deletion of a row or updation. So this we call it as an event. And conditions will be checked, and the conditions are is batch complete, has students passed, etc. And you have to write the action. If that particular event occurs, what action you wanted to perform, that has to be written within the block. Okay, so actions are executed if the conditions are satisfied. So processing of database content performed by the DBMS engine itself, not by the application client. So the execution of the trigger, okay, so that's the event, and it is initiated by certain specified conditions depending on the type of the trigger. For example, firing of the trigger based on the condition what you have mentioned. All data actions performed by the trigger execute within the same transaction in which trigger fires. But in a separate section, you have to mention the action what you wanted to do, and triggers are checked for different privileges as necessary for the process data. Cannot contain transaction control statement like commit, save point, rollback, etc. So this transaction control statements are not allowed in triggers. Now this database triggers in SQL, it is not specified in SQL 92, but it is standardized in SQL 3. Available in most enterprise DBMS, Oracle, IBM DB2, MS SQL Server, and some public domain database management system like Postgres, but not present in smaller desktop Oracle Lite or public domain DBMS MySQL. Some vendors, that is, some vendor DBMS permit native extension to SQL for specifying the triggers. For example, PLSQL in Oracle, okay, and then transaction SQL in ML SQL Server. These vendors, they support these triggers. So in that case, it will be provided as an extension. Some databases allow use of this general purpose programming language instead of SQL. For example, C or C++ in Python, Java in Oracle, C Sharp or VB in SQL Server, etc. Some DBMS extend the triggers beyond tables, for example, also to view as in Oracle. Now we'll see what are the different types of triggers. So how many times should the trigger body execute when the triggering event take place? So you have to, so based on that, there are two types. One is per statement and the second one is for each row. The trigger body, in case of this per statement, the trigger body execute once for the triggering event. So this is the default type of trigger. And the second type is for each row. In this case, the trigger body executes once for each row affected by the triggering event. When the trigger can be, you should understand what is this trigger. We will write like I will write a PLSQL procedure, right? And we will mention when this procedure has to be automatically called. Normally, we know what is a procedure and functions. We call that function or procedure explicitly. But in case of triggers, automatically these triggers will be initiated or executed by the system itself when a particular event occurs. Okay, but you have to mention on what event you have to fire these triggers, and also you have to mention the condition when the trigger can be fired. Relative to the execution of an SQL DML statement, you can mention whether it need to fire before or after that event. Okay, before, after, or instead of. That you can mention. And also exactly in a situation depending on specific system resources. Example, signal from system clock or expiring timer or exhausting memory. So that also you can mention. Now we'll see an example, then you will understand. Statement and row triggers. So here, example one is for monitoring statement events. The event is an insert event. We are going to insert some values in the department table. Execute only once, even if multiple rows are affected. And another one is, I said the two types of events triggers we have seen, right? Per statement for each row. So the first example is for that is for per statement, and the second example is for each row. This update statement, update here we are updating the employee table, and we are modifying the value of the salary where department number is equal to 30. So in this case, it executes each row of the table which is affected by the event. Okay. And firing sequence of database triggers on a single row. Here we have a table called department table, and you have to mention when this trigger has to be initiated. So you have to mention before statement trigger or after statement trigger. If it is a before statement trigger, what it will be triggered before that particular event. Okay, and then before row trigger, so first before statement trigger will be initiated, and then before row trigger will be initiated, and after row trigger, and finally the after statement trigger. So you should understand, I said there are two types of trigger. One is statement, okay, other one is row. And in that also we have two types. One is before event or after event. If it is before event, okay, in that case, okay, it will be executed before the insert or delete or update. So when you see here, firing sequence of database triggers on multiple rows. So for example, if it is a statement trigger and the condition is before, so the statement trigger, as I said, it will be executed only once. If you say it is before, that is before statement trigger, in that case, before that particular event, it will be executed. And if it is after, okay, if the condition is after insert, in that case, after insert, this trigger will be initiated. But at the same time, if it is for each row, in that case, for each row, it will be initiated. Again, you have to mention for each row whether it is before or after, accordingly it will work. Now we'll see what is the syntax for creating a trigger. So the syntax, it contains a trigger name, and also you have to mention timing. Then you have to mention the first thing, you have to mention what is your trigger name. For example, create or replace trigger name. How we are creating table? When we are creating a table, we are giving a table name, right? Similarly, for creating the trigger also, we have to mention a trigger name, and also you have to mention timing. Okay. So, what do you mean by this timing? You have to mention whether it is before or after or instead of. Then the third thing you have to mention is about the triggering event. What do you mean by a triggering event? It may be an insert or delete or update. Then you have to mention the filtering condition. That condition has to be mentioned, checked when the triggering event occurs. And the fifth one is the target table or the view. Okay. So while updating a table, which table? So that table name or view name you have to mention. So table or a view against which the trigger is fired. They should be both created within the same schema. And the sixth one is about the triggering parameter. So parameters are used to denote the record columns preceded by colon. For example, whether it is the new value or old value, okay, so that version has to be mentioned and it will be prefixed with a colon. And the seventh one is the triggering action. So these are the SQL statements that are executed when the trigger fires. And this set of action has to be written within begin and end. Are you able to understand? So when the triggering event fires, when the trigger call, that is when the condition is satisfied, what actually you wanted to do. So that has to be given within this begin and end. Okay, so the action statement has to be given within this begin and end. Kindly note down the syntax. So create or replace. You have to use the keyword called trigger, mention the trigger name, then you have to mention the timing. Okay, so timing is before or after. You have to say whether it is before or after or instead of. So that has to be mentioned. Then you have to mention what is the event, whether it is insert or update or delete. Okay, so that has to be mentioned. So that is the triggering event. Okay, then you have to mention the table name. For example, when there is an event called insert in the student table, okay, so I have to mention the table name. So student table. So if this particular event occurs, so automatically this trigger will be called. So if it is called, what action you wanted to carry it out. Okay, so that action has to be mentioned between this begin and end. This is the syntax. Why we are using this replaces, this is optional actually. When you simply use this create keyword, if there is a trigger with the same name already exists, in that case it will show an error. It says that already a trigger with the same name exists. But when you give create or replace, if the trigger is already exist, that trigger will be replaced with this new trigger. Okay, so that's why we are using this replace. Normally while we are creating view also we use this create or replace. Okay, the same thing. And the trigger body consisting of SQL statement will be executed only once according to the prescribed timing when the event 1 or event 2 or 3 occurs against the monitor table in question table name. Okay, we'll see an example. See this example. Here we are creating a trigger called increase salary trigger. Okay, so create trigger. This is the trigger name. This is the trigger name. Any trigger name you can give. Okay, so increase salary trigger. And the timing here, what we have mentioned is before update, we wanted to call this trigger. Okay, before update of salary. So this is the attribute name on the employee table. Before updating the salary column. So this is the attribute name or the column name. Okay, on employee table. So this is the employee table. This is the table name on which table that you have to mention. So whenever there is an update on the salary field of the employee table, what you have to do, this is the action. So between this begin and end, you have to write the action. So what we wanted to do, insert into salary history. There is another table called salary history. Okay, in that salary history, you have to insert this values called increased changed on values. Okay, so for example, already in the employee table, okay, so now we have two tables. One is employee table, another one is salary history table, right? Salary history table. And here, assume that the salary is 10,000 in the employee table. Now you have updated the salary to 15,000. Okay. Now some event has occurred. That is, you are updating this 10,000 to 15,000. You are updating the salary to salary from 10,000 to 15,000. Okay. So whenever there is an update, but before update, what you have to do is now you have to insert into this salary history table, and two values you have to insert. You have to mention whether the salary is increased or not. If it is increased, then you have to mention yes. Okay, and also when it has been increased, that is changed on which date. So you have to mention the system date. Okay, so this is the action you wanted to perform. So whenever that particular event occurs, you wanted to update this new table called salary. So each time you need not worry. Okay. So actually, what you wanted to do is you wanted to maintain a table called salary history. So whenever there is an update in the salary, you wanted to monitor that and you wanted to keep that records in a table. So each time you have to check. Instead, if you write a trigger, it's like a procedure. Okay. You have to create a trigger, and if it is available in the system, automatically, whenever there is an update on the salary field of the employee table, this procedure will be called, this trigger will be called. Automatically, this insert operation will be done in the salary history. Is it clear? So in this example, as I said, trigger name is increase salary trigger. Timing is before executing the statement. Triggering event is update of salary column. And the target object is employee table. And the triggering action you wanted to perform is you wanted to perform some insert operation. You got it? It's very simple. And syntax for creating row triggers. The same thing. Create or replace trigger. You have to mention the trigger name. Okay, you have to mention the trigger name. Then again, you have to mention the timing. That is, you have to mention whether it is before or after or instead of. Mention the event, insert or delete or update. On table name, you have to mention. Here, we are going to use referencing old as old. Okay, new as new. You have to use another statement called for each row. For each row, give a condition. So what will happen for each row? Okay, this updation, this action will be taking place. So the trigger body consists of SQL statements. Okay, that action statement, no, that will be executed once for each row affected by the event one. In the table name, you have mentioned that is in the table name, the table name subject to the additional condition. Is it clear? In the previous case, the action will be performed only once. In this case, for each row, this action will be performed. So this is example 2. Here we are creating a trigger called derive commission trigger. Okay, so this is another trigger, derive commission trigger, and here the triggering timing is before and the event. Okay, so this is the timing, and this is the event update. Okay, of salary column on employee table for each row. Here we have mentioned for each row, and we have mentioned the condition. What is the condition? The condition is whenever new dot job is equal to salesman. Whenever new dot job is equal to salesman, then we wanted to perform this action. Okay, we wanted to perform this action. So within this begin and end, you have to perform the action. What you wanted to do? You wanted to apply this action for each row which satisfies this condition. New dot job is equal to salesman. That is, this reference has to be prefixed with colon. Okay, so colon new dot commission is equal to old dot commission. Okay, so what we are doing is uh, we are calculating the new commission. So the new commission is equal to whatever is the old commission. Before update, some value will be there, no? So that old commission into new dot salary divided by old dot salary. Okay, so what you're doing, you're calculating the commission. Okay, so you're deriving the commission. So whenever the job is equal to salesman, whenever you're updating, okay, whenever you're updating the salary column on the employee table, and the job is equal to, okay, salesman, or then you have to calculate the commission. So you have to calculate the new commission, because now you have changed the salary. Based on the salary, commission has to be modified, right? So new commission is equal to old commission into new salary divided by old salary. That the change has to be modified. Okay, so for each row this modification will be done. So trigger name is derive commission trigger, timing is before, triggering event is update, filtering condition is salesman. Whenever the job is equal to salesman, this changes will be applied. And the target is employee table. Okay, and the trigger parameters are old and new. Triggering action is for each row which satisfies the condition job is equal to salesman, you have to calculate the new commission. And kindly note down one point, no colon before new in when. So this is the condition. While you are checking the condition, you need not give colon. In all of the cases, it has to be prefixed with, whether it is new or old, it has to be prefixed with colon. Okay. And the trigger execution order is, you execute all before statement triggers. Okay. First, whenever there is a before condition, that will be executed, and disable temporary all integrity constraints recorded against the table. Then loop for each row in the table. That is, executes all before row triggers, execute the SQL statements against the row, and perform the integrity constraint checking of the data. Then execute all after row triggers. So first before row triggers will be executed, and then after row triggers will be executed. Complete the deferred integrity constraint checking against the table, then execute all the after statement. So this order already I have told you in using that diagram. And some commands are there for controlling the triggers using SQL. That is, you can disable or re-enable the database trigger. For example, for that, the syntax is you have to use alter trigger. Initially, we have seen how to create a trigger. Okay, so you can then you have to use the command called alter trigger, trigger name. For example, already the trigger is active, it is enabled. And if you wanted to change that to disable, you can mention that disable. That means the trigger that you have activated, you have created will be disabled. Okay, and now already it is in the disable mode. Now you wanted to enable. In that case, also the same command has to be used. So alter trigger, trigger name, then instead of disable, you just give enable, and disable or enable all triggers for a table. In that case, alter table, table name. Okay, then you have to say whether it is disable or enable. You have to use all triggers. So how many triggers that are written on a particular table, all triggers will be enabled or disabled. And now you have created a trigger, and you wanted to drop the trigger, you wanted to delete the trigger. Okay, in that case you have to use the syntax called drop trigger. Okay, and you have to mention the trigger name. And using database triggers, when we will use this database triggers are, one is for auditing table operations, for tracking record values, for protecting database referential integrity, Okay, so already we have discussed about what is referential integrity constraint or foreign key constraint. So for protecting that, and for maintenance of semantic integrity, and for storing derived data, and for security access control, normally we use triggers. Okay, so triggers are used for this purposes. One is for auditing table operations, tracking record value changes, and third is for protecting database integrity constraint, and fourth is for maintenance of semantic integrity, then for storing derived data as well as for security access control. Okay, so whenever you wanted to audit a particular table, okay, whenever you wanted to audit a particular table, so each time the table is accessed, okay, each time the table is accessed, auditing information is recorded against it. Okay, and tracking of record value changes, each time a record value is changed, the previous value is recorded. So for that also you can write triggers. Similarly for protecting the database referential integrity, okay, and also for maintaining semantic integrity. So this is an example for auditing table operation. Okay. So whenever you wanted to perform an auditing, whenever you wanted to perform an auditing, you wanted to check something, in that case, you can write a trigger. For example, counting statement execution. Here we have written a trigger called audit employee after delete. So here what is the timing? Timing is after, whenever there is an event called delete. Okay, delete occurs. So what are the triggering events? Insert, delete or update. So here in this example we have mentioned the triggering event as delete. On which table? On employee table. Here we are going to execute that for each row. So begin. So this is the action that we wanted to perform. Okay, this is the action that we wanted to execute whenever there is a delete operation on the employee table. So what we are going to do? Whenever there is a delete, we are going to update the audit table. Okay, so there is a table called audit table that we are going to update. So in that case, okay, delete is equal to delete plus 1. So how many delete operation that has been done, that we are updating in the audit table. So where username is equal to user and table name is equal to employee. So we in the from the audit table we can find out how many delete operation has been done. Otherwise you have to count it manually, right? So instead you can write a trigger, automatically that trigger will count that. So whenever you open the audit table, you will know how many delete has been happened. Okay. So whenever an employee record is deleted from the database, the counter in the audit table registering the number of deleted rows of the current user in the system. Okay. So you can easily find the number, okay, of delete. So it will trace. So tracing record value changes, the second example. In this case, when you see create or replace trigger, we are writing a trigger called audit employee values. Here also the timing is after and the event is delete or update. Okay. So here we have mentioned two event. This is event 1 and this is event 2. Okay. On employee table. This also we are going to perform for each row. So whenever this event occurs, either delete or update, we wanted to perform this action. Okay. So between this begin and end, what action that you wanted to carried out. So that has to be mentioned here. So here what we are doing, we are inserting. So inserting into audit employee values. Whenever there is a delete or update, okay, we are entering the details into the audit employee values. What are the details that you have to insert? Username, timestamp, ID, okay, all that attributes you wanted to insert. Okay, and so values, these are the attribute names. Okay, values, And then you have to insert the username, system date, okay, all old values you are storing, okay, because you wanted to store all those information, okay. So old employee number, old employee name, and then new employee name, okay, then old job, new job, okay, old salary, new salary, everything we are recording. That means now your audit employee values, okay, contains all the details. Whenever there is a delete or update, you know what is the old value and what is the new value. Sometimes if the system crashes or something, if you wanted to revert back, or what changes they have done, if you wanted to see, that is possible. So whenever some details of the employee table are deleted or updated, both the previous and the new details are recorded in the audit table, okay. And the third example is, I said, it can be used for protecting the referential integrity. Okay. So in this example, here again, create or replace trigger. Now I hope the syntax now you will be is very clear to you, because we are seeing different examples, right? So create or replace trigger, cascade updates. Okay. In this case, the triggering event is update, and the timing is after of department number on the department table. So this department number is the attribute name, and this department is the table name. Okay. Department is the table name for each row. So you have to begin what action you wanted to perform. You wanted to change update employee table. So whenever there is a change, whenever there is an update in the department table, you have to update the employee table as well. Are you able to understand? Because there is an integrity constraint. There is an integrity constraint between department table and employee table. So whenever there is a modification in the department table, that modification has to be reflected in the employee table as well. So that we are performing using triggers. And restriction of database triggers. See, for example, even though I said on different cases you can use triggers, okay, it is not advisable to use triggers for all scenarios or all cases. So here we are going to see when these triggers may not be that much useful and we should not use triggers. One is impossible to determine certain values during execution of a sequence of operation belonging to one and the same transaction. That this is one problem. And whenever there is a mutating table, that is contains rows which changes their values after certain operation and which are used again before the current transaction commences. Okay, so this we call it as mutating tables. And preventing table mutation should not contain rows which are constrained by rows from other changing tables, and also should not contain rows which are updated and read in one and the same operation, should not contain rows which are updated and read via other operations during the same transaction. Okay, so